Hello, we'll be talking about the Spanish tercio formation today, which is might seem like a strange thing to talk about in Shogun 2, um, but it's an interesting formation or combined sort of fighting group, battle group that the Spanish used around the Middle Ages, and it roughly corresponds to the time period at Shogun 2. I don't think the Japanese ever used these tactics, but I do think it's a very interesting sort of... The Spanish were very powerful with their tercio formations. They pretty much dominated European battlefields for probably about 100 years or so, just with these, these veteran troops in these formations supporting each other. So tercio formation is it's the Spanish for 1/3, and the tercio formation they tend to deploy them in groups of 3. They would have 3 tercios together, so that's where it comes from. But I suppose the other reason you might call it a tercio formation, or the third formation, is that it's composed of 3 different arms, as in infantry, 3 different types of infantry. So we have probably the core of it are the pikemen. We don't have pikemen in Shogun 2. We have long yari ashigaru though, so which are basically the same thing. You have long spears and they operate the same way. Then we have arquebusiers, well, we have matchlocks, which are basically the same thing. And finally, the Spanish use sword and buckler infantry, so swords and shields, but we have katana infantry, so it's close enough. The Japanese never actually had any infantry carry shields into battle. Like they did have stationary shields that they use for sieges and the like, but they never or on the defensive, but they never actually had any handheld shields, as far as I know. So the way this formation works is the matchlocks are the ranged skirmishers, and so they deal with enemy matchlocks. They soften up the enemy before the infantry start clashing, and that's fairly normal. We have bows, we have matchlocks, we have things that fit that sort of. So they basically do that job. Now the problem, of course, with matchlocks and any other skirmishing unit is that if infantry come up on them, assuming they can get through the volleys, they can charge in and they just make a mess out of matchlocks, because matchlocks can't really defend themselves in close combat. Or alternatively, if cavalry can get in, cavalry can move pretty quick, and if the matchlocks are busy with something else, the cavalry might come in without us knowing. So the matchlocks, of course, are vulnerable. We can't have them on their own unless we have an enormous amount of firepower, which at this time firearms couldn't really put out that kind of firepower. So then we have the pikemen. Now, if we have pike squares, these guys can move through the gaps and reform wherever. And any infantry, they either would have to narrow themselves into a column to get through, which makes them extremely vulnerable to the pikes, because the pikemen can just assault them. Alternatively, they have to advance and take on the pikes to get to the matchlocks behind. And so at this point, if these guys are pikemen too, then it'll be pike on pike. It would just be a push of pike, and it's just going to be a bloody mess. That's where the katanas come in, or the sword infantry, I should say. So if these guys come into pike versus pike combat, it's going to be a bloodbath. But see, the reason why pike's quite powerful is because if you have a bunch of guys with spears all facing the same way, they're just going to be stabbing everything. It's a very dense pack of spears. But then, that's very strong, but that only works if the guys who are wielding these pikes can focus on just stabbing what's in front of them. If units come in on the side, so if these guys are engaged in a pike battle and they're all stabbing each other, that's going to be a pretty bloody mess. But if we get our sword infantry to come around the side and come in the back and flank these guys, then they're going to be able to disrupt the formation. Once a pike formation is disrupted, the guys, they're trying to use 12-foot pikes to try and fight guys right in their face with swords. It doesn't really work so well. If they can keep the swords at bay, it works differently. But if they can't, then they're screwed. So, assuming these guys can stay in formation, then they're going to hold out, even against enemy pikes. if they do bring up enemy pikes, we bring up our swords and we flank them. If they bring up other infantry, if they bring up sword infantry of their own, so we got sword infantry against these pikes, there's no problem if it's frontal. But otherwise, if they do the same thing as us, they have pikes and they have swords, then we use our own swords to protect our pikes. Of course, then it's sort of a tertio versus tertio sort of situation. Meanwhile, we have the matchlocks. They can reform to the sides, to wherever they can find space, and they can continue firing. So that's the basic idea of it. So we see how like every arm protects each other. So we have the matchlock skirmishing. If the cavalry come in, they fall behind, and the cavalry come in and they have to deal with pikes. Or if the infantry come in, they have to come and deal with pikes. And if something is starting to mess up our pikes and screw up our pike formations, whether it's another pike unit, whether it's other infantry, or whether just being overwhelmed, we can use our sword infantry to come in and help them out. And they can try and help keep these pikes in formation and keep, you know, enemy infantry from getting into there and screwing up the formation. As well as that, the sword infantry are very useful offensively, because pikes can be used offensively, not in Shogun 2, because in Shogun 2, well, they can be, but they're not very effective in that. Because in real life, they would just level their pikes and walk towards the enemy pretty much. But sword infantry can move quicker, because they don't really have to stay in formation, they can just run in there. So that also gives us a bit of an offensive punch as well. So once all these dudes get engaged, once the enemy is engaging with your spears, you can bring in a sword, your sword infantry behind, flank round, do hammer and anvil tactics, or you know, you just keep them in reserve for tactical flexibility. So that's the idea behind the tercio. And so we have like a pseudo-tercio because we're in Japan. This is Shogun 2, but I do have a battle replay. It's coming up next, and hopefully that sort of maybe demonstrates what's going on. Okay, I'm back, and we have the so I've set up 3 tertio formations. I'll just hit play now anyway, since they won't be moving too far. I've got the general at the back. So I've set it up so we have 2 units of matchlocks at the front. We've got 3 units of long area ashigaru, or we'll just call them pikemen, and I got 1 unit of katana samurai at the back. Now, I made a lot of mistakes in this battle because this is the first time I've run this kind of setup. I hope it gives you some ideas on how to, maybe some different ideas on army deployments and that kind of stuff. Now, another disclaimer is I'm actually using Darth mod, so that may affect how the if you're playing the vanilla game, it might work a little differently. Still, I think might be something worth experimenting with. You know, a little I noticed, you might notice I have no cavalry except the general, of course, but I just wanted to test this formation out. Some cavalry would be good, probably. Although I'm more of a infantry sort of guy, so I don't know. Anyway, so we got the Tokugawa army coming up, and there's a good mix of units. They have they got Yari cavalry, or spear cav. They got some light cav, bow cav. They got some samurai, naginatas, matchlocks. Some matchlock samurai there. Got spears, naginatas, Yari, or more spears rather, not Yari, and so on and so forth. So it's a fairly well balanced army. And of course I'm just setting up defensive position here. If I hit space, I can see all the fire arcs, and I'm just waiting for them. So I'll just speed it up a little bit. Okay, so I moved these guys back a little bit for no particular reason. I just wanted to get our guys in the cover of the trees. And it was around this point I noticed all their cavalry was going this side. So they're just, I guess they're just trying to go overwhelm that flank. So let's speed it up a bit more. So around this time I started redeploying these. I put all these guys in spear squares because I figured the cavalry would start charging in. And the idea here is you get the matchlocks, the arquebusiers, if you're Spanish, and you use the spears, the pikemen, to protect them from enemy cavalry or infantry. Now at the moment they weren't coming into range yet, so not much going on at the moment still. But the idea is, of course, these guys are sort of the bulwarks and of the force, and everything moves around these pikes, because the pikes are very strong. You'll probably see that later. Okay, so we're starting to get some engagement going on here. Some skirmishing, the matchlocks are engaging the enemies.
Our hidden units have been discovered, my lord.
And here comes some cav. So I'll just zoom out a little bit here and just let the battle play out. So this katana unit's rushing in. This cav unit, like cav, they're not too much of a threat really. So the whole army is basically rushing in. We got a lot of close combat troops, infantry moving in, and they're taking some casualties from the matchlocks. Now this cav unit rushed in and took out, charged into my matchlock unit without really noticing. And I forgot to put these guys in skirmish. As I said, I was experimenting, so I wasn't too fussed if I didn't pull this off right. Anyway, so I started rushing these guys away, and now these pikes are engaging. So these matchlocks are running behind the safety of the pikes, while the infantry engage. And see, these pike squares are quite powerful formations because they're just turning this spear cav unit into they just turn him into Swiss cheese. And so he actually tried to rush some cav behind me and take out my general, but he just went into these matchlocks. I pulled back instead. Now my center actually took a lot of casualties because I wasn't really paying attention. I was all over the place. Now over here I didn't actually put these guys in spear squares, I just put them in a spear wall, but they did a really good job anyway. Probably because the matchlocks softened them up. Again, you watch how this works, is these guys frontally are very powerful, matchlocks soften them up and then pull back behind the safety of the spear wall. Now in the katana samurai I go here, they're in reserve, and I started to rush them after these guys, but it wasn't really necessary. So these guys are again rushing after the matchlocks. Should really pull these guys. I should probably spread this formation out, but as I said, I was just experimenting. So now they actually have some firebomb throwers in there. I didn't really notice, and at this they were really doing a number on that unit. Over here, these spear squares are really held out against the cav. They're just, I'm not exactly sure. Well, these are bow cabs, so these are mounted gunners, so they're just firing at the spear squares. Again, I wasn't really paying attention. I had a lot to manage, so probably should have done something about that. But and this cav unit was back here the whole time, killing this mounted gun matchlock unit. So I rushed these katanas in to help them out. Again, these firebomb throwers really stuffing this unit up, so eventually I just got some guys to charge into them, I think. I rushed this pike unit back to take out these cav.
My lord, their general has fallen! A cutting blow!
This matchlock unit is pretty much wiped out by this katana samurai unit, which I didn't really notice was there. And it's around this time I just rushed all my katanas out and started charging their whatever's left of their army out here, their matchlocks. They have some matchlock samurai, so I just started rushing katanas out. Now if I had a smaller army, this would have been a lot easier to manage. Since this sort of thing does take a little bit of management, because you have to manage your matchlocks, rush them behind, you have to run your matchlocks behind your spears. You have to make sure that they, the cavalry don't keep chasing them away, and you have to make sure your katanas engage at the right time, protect your pikes and protect your matchlocks. So these cav units just sat there the whole time just shooting at me because I wasn't really paying attention to them. I think I moved some matchlock units to fire back. I really probably should have moved these spear units out of spear squares, but So this katana unit's just totally annihilated that matchlock unit. So I started running them this way. I mean, at this point the battle's already won, so it's just, you know, just wiping them out now. Now, so this is a pure infantry force, so one big disadvantage of that is I can't chase them down. If I was in a campaign,
Units have been discovered, my lord.
I wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't really be able to take advantage of this victory so much. They would still have units left over. So cavalry would be pretty handy here, and I would probably alter the composition of this army a bit. Maybe more matchlocks, but I guess that really depends. I'm not exactly sure yet. Still experimenting with it. But in the end, this battle went pretty well. The army was still in pretty good shape. Took some heavy losses, but you know, it's all experimentation. So hope this gives you some ideas on employing European-style tactics to Japanese warfare. Anyway, that's it for now. Actually, let's have a look at the unit statistics. So let's see. Nothing particularly stands out. Well, this Katana Samurai unit did pretty well. They got 300 kills. And some of these matchlock units did pretty well as well. And some of the pike units did well as well. Again, it's a combined arms force, so you kind of expect something like that. Again, it's sort of rock, paper, scissors, although really the pikes are extremely good if they're in defense. So the katanas, the swords, give you some offensive capability, and they help keep the pikes safe, because if the formation doesn't really happen in Shogun 2, but if the formation did get broken, they would just fall apart. And the katanas do give you a bit of offensive punch as well, I guess. So anyway, I'll see you next time.